One of my favorite poems from the great and late Gil Scott-Heron was a poem called Black History. And given what is happening in the United States at its current time, the encroaching Martin Luther King holiday, and which precedes Black History Month, I thought it would be a good thing to share my interpretation of Professor Heron's poem. The poem is called Black History. I was wondering about our yesterdays and started searching through the rubble. And to say the very least, someone went through a hell of a lot of trouble to make sure that when we look things up, we would not fare too well and we would come up with totally unreliable portraits of ourselves. But I compiled what few facts I could, such as they are, to see if I could shed a little bit of light, and this is what I got so far. First, white folks discovered Africa, and they claimed it fair and square. Cecil Rhodes couldn't have been robbing anyone because he said, hell, nobody was there. White folks brought all of the civilization since there wasn't any around. They thought, how could these folks be civilized when you never see them writing things down? And just to prove all of their suspicions, well, it did not take too long. They found out there were whole groups of people in plain sight running around without much clothing on. Yep. There were women and men and young folks and old folks. Righteous white folks covered their eyes, and no time was spent considering the environment. They said, my word, this is uncivilized. Another way that they knew these folks were backwards, or at least this is how it is taught, that unlike the very civilized people of Europe, these black folks actually fought. And yes, there were rather crude implements, and yes, there was primitive art, and yes, they were masters of agriculture. Hunting and fishing and courtesy came from the heart. And yes, there was medicine, love and religion, intertribal communication by drum, but no paper and pencils or other utensils. Hell, these folks never even heard of a gun. So this is why the colonies came, to stabilize the land. The dark continent had copper, diamonds, and gold, and the discoverers had themselves a plan. They would discover all the places with promise. They required neither title nor deed, and then they would appoint people to make everything legal, which sanctioned the trickery and the greed. And out in the jungle, if the natives got restless, they would cry out, guerrilla attack! And they would fail to describe. Some of the brothers got wise and decided they were going to fight back. But still, we are victims of word games. Semantics is always a bitch. Places once called underdeveloped and backwards, they now call them mineral rich. And still it remains. The game goes on with unity just beyond our reach. Remember Egypt and Libya? They used to be in Africa, but they've been moved to the Middle East. There are examples galore, I assure you, but if interpreting was left up to me, I'd make sure every time folks knew this version was not mine, which is why it is called his story.